There we are. Welcome to In or Out, the European Ultimate Federation show about the European Ultimate Club season. I'm Ravi and Benjy here to preview the Elite Invite. It's going to be a great weekend this upcoming weekend. We're going to talk all about it, as well as the last spring tour in Espo. Don't forget about that Northern Spring Tour. Before we get into the show, though, a couple notes that I want to mention here. First of all, last show, Liam Grant asked if there could be some publication saying everything to do with the streaming platform. What do you get for what you're paying for? And we're going to put a QR code up here. There is now a streaming vision which talks all about exactly what the point of this new streaming platform is, what you're going to get for your money, exactly why choices were made. So I'm not going to go into all of it here, but definitely go there if you want to preview a bit about what's coming up this weekend. For Elite Invite, we're going to have 2 fields that are operated by manual cameras and 2 fields operated by AI cameras. So we're still going to get every single game from Elite Invite streamed in some capacity or another. And 2 of them will be done with that nicer quality with the manual cameras that we're used to. So yeah, you can look forward to that. You can also look forward to EYUC coming up soon this summer, and there we're aiming to get basically every games streamed there as well. We're not promising that yet, but that is the aim, and we're hoping that on this platform you get to see all the youth competition, all of Elite Invite, and of course the rest of the when we get into summer tours, Masters, and the big show at the end, the UCF. We'll all be there for that price. So check that link, check that QR code. If you've got any questions about it, you can also put it here in the chat. I'll try to do my best to answer them. Maybe Nemo will help me in the chat if there's some that I don't know the answer to. But yeah, that was topic number 1. Topic number 2, deadlines, rosters, and what happened that I'm sure some people have heard about. Please mind the deadlines for your rosters. Look at the ranking.ultimatefederation.eu site. If you go to the event page, you can look at any event, and if you're going to play it, make sure your team is listed there. You can see what the deadline for your roster is. Make sure you get that event roster on time, and please double check when you're a team admin that if you make your roster, that all your players are included. So that'll bring us to something that I think has spread a little bit around, but maybe not everybody heard about it. It was a situation that happened at Tom's tourney a few weeks ago where Clapham was, after the tournament, somebody noted to us that they were playing with a player that was not on their master roster. And of course, because of that, not on their event roster. And because of this, the competition committee went into deliberations, tried to figure out what to do. The official rule on the website said that if somebody played with an unrostered player at an official UCS game, that the team should be disqualified for the season. But we are, revisiting that as we realized that in this case that was way too strong of a sanction since it was just an admin error. We put that rule in there if like somebody really cheated, like if they really, took a ringer player from another team for a tournament to boost their rankings. That wasn't the case here. So we're probably going to reword that sanction a bit to say that sanctions will be imposed on you up to and including disqualification, depending on, exactly the nature of the roster error. But please all work together. Double check your event rosters. Make sure everything's in line. If somebody's not on your master roster, double check with your national federation to make sure that they put that player on. And just please make sure that if you're going to play any EUCS game, whether it's at a tournament or not, that it is not with a unrostered player. So what happened with Clapham? There was initial ruling by the competition committee to impose a fine, remove the game. They only played one UCS game, which was against Is No Good at Tom's. Remove that game from the ranking system since it was deemed illegitimate. And there was an initial idea to suspend one of the players. Clapham appealed that, which we have an appeal process. They appealed that, and an appeal board re-looked at the case and decided that the suspension of the player was not warranted, but did change a bit of things about the fine. So in the end, we will be removing the game, Clapham versus Is No Good, from the ranking system. If you go to the webpage right now, if you will load up the previous ranking from the one that's up there that I ran today, the Is No Good Clapham game is still there. But if you look at the rankings today, that game is not there anymore. So some people shifted around the rankings because of that. But yeah, it won't be counted for the final rankings going forward. So yeah, I don't want to dwell on that too much. If there are some pressing questions, of course, that's what the show is for, to make sure there's a lot of transparency, but also to reveal what's going on with the ranking system. So feel free to put a question here about that. But enough about that stuff, and let's bring on our guest today. To preview the late invite, I'm going to have Benjy Reese, friend of mine, co-commentator, here with his cat, and ultimate aficionado, watches basically every game there is to watch. Benjy, how are you doing today?
I'm a little bit under the weather, but things are better when you've got a cat. Bye then. See you later. Plugging on.
Did you enjoy watching the college champs from the United States this past weekend? I know I saw you were one of my fellow Europeans there, following along in the LT World Discord.
Yeah, watching on a definitely legal version of the broadcast. I tell you what, it's a good job that if I was someone who had paid good money for the broadcast, I would be extremely upset.
The finals broadcast, to be clear. I mean, our friends at LT World do a pretty good job with the other
crew did a fantastic job all week. And then ESPN comes in. And in the past, they've used LT World's coverage, but just, put it on ESPN with the graphics and stuff. Other times, they've, it's been a crew who, obviously they're not focused on Ultimate, but they shoot it sort of reasonably well. It feels like this might have been the worst they've done yet, which is quite some going.
Yeah. But aside from that, the action was great. Great fun to watch. The women's final especially is one to watch. There might be a way to see it on Twitch. We won't talk too much about that. But yeah, you should check out that game if you can. But so let's stick here to Europe. Benjy, have you been on this show? Or is this your first time on this show? Sorry?
I'm not sure that I have.
Okay, I don't remember if you were on one of the UCF preview ones or not.
Oh yes, yeah. That actually I had forgotten about that. I was.
Yeah, but not for one of the mid-season ranking shows.
Correct.
I don't know if that I fully got your opinion and your thoughts here, but like, how are you enjoying the ranking system? How are you enjoying the 2025 season? We're now into year 2.
What are your thoughts? From an outside perspective, as someone who's not playing in it, I quite like it. I enjoy that there's lots of things that I can keep track of, and rather than everything existing in its own little bubble, it's all a bit interconnected a bit more. It has a bit more. Everything feels like it has a bit more weight to it. The problem I have is that and this is my only problem, is that with the spring tours, because they've all got different numbers of teams, they don't necessarily have the same, and they don't have the same structure, which is understandable. But it feels weird to have a tournament where you don't get an out-and-out winner necessarily at the end. That's the one thing that I think is a bit weird. I feel like teams would probably put a bit more stock in it if they could say, well, we didn't just play lots of good high-level games. We also had maybe a bit of hardware to play for. It gives that intensity up a little bit more, I think. But otherwise, I am really enjoying it, especially when we got to summer tours last year and we were kind of all keeping an eye on those wildcard bids.
Yeah, I'd be curious, people in the chat, if you want to give your opinion on that. That's something we wrestled with the competition committee to take the spring tours. We realized making a winner is not what we need as EUF. We need as many games without rematches as possible, so get as much connectivity as possible. And we thought the teams at this stage of the season might care more about that than getting an all-out winner. But I definitely bet there's some people that's on Benjy's side that would like to have a nice final at the spring tour. So in the chat, if you got opinions on that, please feel free to share them, and we'll take that on as some feedback and think about it again as we keep reshaping this thing every year.
I am really excited for E2CF later this year. I think that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Me too. Especially as a team that's maybe aiming to hit that spot. We'll see what happens with the E2CF later this season. Okay, I think we'll start off looking at the rankings, and there hasn't been much change, but I'll quickly take a look here. In the mixed, as you can see, the deltas are 0 because there were no games between this ranking or not. So I'm not going to go too deep into it unless, Benjy, there's anything that you saw that you were specifically super interested about in the mixed ranking.
Nothing in particular, really. It'll be interesting to see, again, once there's a bit more games, kind of an interconnectivity between the teams, how things begin to normalize out. With all due respect to Forehand, I think they're a team that many would not be expecting to see at the top of the rankings necessarily. Not to say that they haven't got some very tidy players, but it remains to be seen once more games come in whether they can keep hold of that.
Yeah, I would note that I did notice that there's also this weekend the Wrocław invite, which will have forehands and some other teams. I don't believe this connects the Timisoara Spring Tour to any of the other tours. I think these are all teams that either haven't played yet or has RJP played somewhere else?
Yeah, they were definitely at a spring
Lund.
tour.
So they were at Lund. So Lund and Timisoara will get connected at least after this weekend with the Wrocław invite. And of course, then the Elite invite's going to connect a lot of things as well. But yeah, we'll see if Forehands keeps their first place ranking after this weekend. I would bet on not as well. All right, so we'll take a look at Open as the next one alphabetically. So something shifted around here. Clapham's dropped a few spots because they before this weekend they had one game, which was the Isno game. That game got canceled out, and then at Fog Lane Cup they had also a single game, which was beating Bristol in a blowout. And since Bristol are not doing so hot in the rankings right now, they're actually lower down than they were with their I believe it was a 13-8 win over Isno Good. So I'm sure that's going to change up quite a bit when they get some Elite Invite games into their system. But yeah, Chalk in first, Moon in second. We got Hrut, Lafota, Clapham, Costa Rica Grandes, Heidi's, 3SB, Bad Skid, Ranelagh. And then that's kind of the safe zone. Then the wild card, tricky zone. We got Quixotes, Isno, Smashed, Alba, Rat Track, and Catch Up. Then below that in the E2CF regions, One Tribe, Barcelona, Echo, Hardfish, Jet Set, Free Speed, Solabang, and Outseaters. Red Bulls just on the outside looking in. But I think, as I mentioned to Liam last show, a lot of this will get pushed down as there are a few, I believe Wall City's not in here yet. Chevron Action Flash is not in here yet. A few more top teams that we expect to be in the top after Elite Invite might push everyone down a couple spots.
Shout out to those teams, by the way, that have already got their 10 games in for the algorithm and can now just relax for the rest of the season.
Let's see if I click on eligible teams only. These are the teams that have gotten their 10 games in already. So if the season ended now, this would be EUCF at the moment. All right. Anything you want to look at here specifically? I think it's still a little early to take too much stock in these rankings. Once the Elite Invite comes in, that's when we really start to kind of get a shape of things. But what are you seeing here? What are you interested in?
I think Chak we were pretty high on Chak coming into the season. Mm-hmm. They'd have been frustrated that they couldn't clutch out that semi-final against Italy U24 at Tom's tourney, but I still think they look very strong, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them have a deep run at Elite Invite. Don't think we've got Gentle on the list yet, and like seeing where Gentle come in after this week is also going to be very interesting.
Yeah. All right, we'll get there in a sec. Yeah, Chalk also, I think you might be saying they're frustrated about that. They also might be frustrated that they have 2 games in the system and they're only going to get 5 at Elite Invite. So they only have 7. And from what I've seen, they don't really have anything else planned. Go to their rosters here. That's it. So they're going to have to find another way to get those 3 more games in before the end of the season if they want to make their way to EUCF, which I'm betting they do.
Yeah, so, there are a few other French teams, more than just them and Isno. So
yeah,
if they wanted to do a little round robin, maybe they wanted to count French Open nationals, then that would be a way for them to get extra games in as well.
Yeah, as a peel behind the curtain, teams are actually required to say whether they would count their nationals when they applied at the beginning of the season, and they opted not to. So that was not something they can change at this moment. But they could still play some other individual games there, but the French nationals one will not be one they could use, actually. So let's go to women's then. We'll go through this period a bit quicker. Shout still on top, Hrut there. So Cheetahs have moved up a couple spots with their single game. I guess whoever they played must have moved up, so they're basically just linked to one single team there.
They're just a big win over Queen Kong.
Yeah, so Queen Kong must have moved up a little bit in the rankings, and for whatever reason. All kinds of second, third order effects there. I see you moving down a bit. I wonder if that's because of some results. I don't think they counted any games at UK Wind Farm, but maybe their opponents went down in the ranking, and so their ranking came down a bit themselves. Other movers here: Tequila Boom Boom up a couple spots, Bristol up a couple spots, Smog down 4, and maybe that's what's bringing Iceni down a little bit. And otherwise than that, East Block down a spot. And some movement around here. Queen Kong pushing themselves into the top 16. We see that down there. And if we go to the ETUCF regions, so Gentle going down 3 spots, that's probably going to hurt. And I know that they we'll like to clean things up a little bit more when it gets to Summer Tour later on this season. Anything in the women's division you want to dig into a little further, Benji?
Something that we won't see in the rankings was at Vienna Spring Break. One of the games we had there was between 3SB and East Block. That was also their WUCC qualifier.
Yeah. And 3SB took it.
3SB won that and have sealed their spot in Limerick next year. And I know other teams are beginning to have their WUCC qualifications as well. So kind of something to keep an eye on, maybe as to when those games occur and whether they're being counted into the algorithm and how that might affect things.
Yeah, I saw Grut women won the Dutch final yesterday, 15-1. Or sorry, on Grut, women on Sunday, 15-1. So they did seal their deal into the WCC, though I don't think anyone had many doubts about that.
Not particularly, no.
Okay, so that's it for the rankings. Anything you're curious about? No one's really asking for stuff in the chat here, as I believe, there wasn't much change from last edition. So, any last questions, or should we go on to the main part of the show here?
I'm happy to move on.
All right, let's pull up the slides for the preview part of the show, the Elite Invite preview, the title of this episode. But we're actually not going to start in the Elite Invite. We're going to start in Espo in Finland, and here we have XVI, KFK, Örebro, Otso, Fire of London, and Piru. So a lot of northern teams, a lot of Scandinavian teams, as well as Dublin and London. What are your thoughts looking at this slate of teams and how this is maybe going to slot into the rankings, Benji?
My first thought is, what is that Otso logo?
It's a bear.
Is it though?
They've had that logo for a while. That's not the
I guess I haven't really looked at it in depth before. It'll be interesting with the chance to look at teams who, we haven't really seen take the field yet this season. Fire of London, I don't know how similar the roster was at Vienna Spring Break to the roster they'll have this weekend, but certainly it did not go well for them in Vienna, so they'll be hoping for a big bounce back. I kind of like the look of Örebro, to be honest. I think there's a lot of good Swedish talent that often gets overlooked, so it wouldn't surprise me to see them do well. Same with Otso and KFK. XVI, I guess maybe I'm taking them for granted a little bit because they had a very strong showing at EUCF last year. I would expect the winner to come from that top group of 4 teams there, with Piru and Fire of London probably on the outside.
Yeah, I think XVI should be able to take this one if last year was like this year. I think Otso has been a team that I think in the 2010s they were quite regularly at EUCF, maybe pushing for the quarterfinals. And I think a lot of those players are still the top players on their team. So they're not. I haven't seen the young part of Otso coming up, and that's probably hurting them to get really in that top 16 these days. XVI was 1 point away from being at Elite Invite last year. They lost on University of Grut in the pre-quarter. They would have been in Leuven if that point went the other way, which they started on offense and managed to turn it over. And but I think KFK didn't quite do as well last season, and Örebro maybe trying to prove themselves with a bit younger Swedish talent. I think it'll be interesting, especially with those top 3, and also, it's their home tournament, so that's always going to give you some type of push. And I think if any of these teams want to get themselves in the top 16, they're going to have a good showing here to start things off well, because I could see one of these teams doing well here, but maybe not doing as well later on in the season. So you'd want to make sure you pin yourself to this like cluster of teams the way you want them.
You can't. I don't think it's going to be enough to just win every game necessarily if you want to get that EUCF berth. I think you want to win the games strongly and well to make sure you're squeezing as many points out of the algorithm as you can.
All right, I think that'll do it for Espo, and we'll move on to start talking about the Elite Invite. So the first thing we're going to show you here is the bracket format for the Elite Invite. Different to last year. For a number of reasons, we decided to change it. instead of every team, Elite Invite has 8 teams. Instead of every team making it to the quarters, we have only the top 2 making it to semis, meaning there's only going to be 5 games over the 3 days for each team. And yeah, it puts a little more stock into that quarterfinal rounds. So yeah, this is going to make things start off a bit more fiery in these rounds.
It's a tough format. Like, I think it's not just Elite, but other tournaments in the past have had it where every team goes into brackets, and it feels like it kind of devalues the pool stage a little bit. Because what's the point of playing the 3 games if everyone makes the bracket anyway? And all it takes is for one team to have the game of their lives in the quarterfinal when they've played pretty poorly during the pool, or sometimes freak things happen. Thinking back to the mixed division of Elite Invite last year when Deep Space came top of their pool, and then their game against Reading was suspended because Tom Fisher broke his collarbone, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so that's suspended, and they played it later. And then Deep Space, they came out a bit flat, whereas Reading kind of were maybe given a bit more of a way in that they not necessarily expecting to have. And Reading very nearly pulled that game out, but Deep Space were able to just about get the job done in the end. And so, yeah, it makes sense that teams would say, no, we want to have a bit more. We want the pool games to have a bit more impact on the tournament as a whole.
Yeah, that was one aspect. And the other aspect was, even though it seems weird that 6 games in 3 days doesn't sound like a lot, I think we only have the final on Sunday, on the last day of the tournament, and we want to keep it that way, of course. And so therefore it made it so if we were going with only 4 games at a time, so each division basically is playing 1 round and then moves on, and then it just made the day way too long for some teams, starting way too early, ending way too late with long full length games like this. So we want to keep that long full length thing because this is really the Elite Invite. We want to showcase what the sport is, and getting only 2 games a day I think fits a bit better that format. So that's partially why the decision was made, and a lot of teams asked us for this, so it wasn't just something we did for no reason.
It'll be interesting to see how that actually affects it, whether teams do you stack your lines a little bit more during the pool stage, whether you keep an eye on what's going on in the other pool, thinking, is there something here where potentially we can just sneak, maybe think actually we fancy playing that opponent a little bit more, but also we can't let our foot off the gas too much because we still need to get in the first place.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game, though. I mean, I think a lot of these teams are fighting for that top 4 seed by the end of the season, and that's very valued because we know what happened to Reading last year as the 5th seed, and we do that randomized pot draw in the next brackets. You kind of control your own destiny a little bit and make sure you don't have another top 4 seed in your pool if you can get one of those top 4 seeds. So if you start playing around with, where can I end up, that might affect your ranking in a big way if you're shooting for that. Every point matters in this algorithm and format. So I would guess most teams are probably not going to try and game it to get a favorable
You've got to go hell for
bracket
leather
play. Yeah.
Although there is a wild card for winning the Elite Invite.
There is, yes.
There?
So
yep.
Winning the whole thing is pretty good, yeah. All right. So with that said, let's start going division by division, and we'll just look at these pools and really try and take a look at see what Benjy, who knows more about European Frisbee than most, thinks. And we're going to end up here. So I'm going to start in the women's division, one of the best divisions, especially when you look at the whole top 8, slate of top 8. Here we've got Goed from Amsterdam in Pool A, BFD Shout from Bologna, Iceni, and Ketchup Graz. That makes up your Pool A. I will start in saying that it's going to be great because we're going to get a rematch of that spring tour final where BFD Shout beat Goed 15-7. Was that a fluke? Did Goed learn their lessons? Is BFD really that good? And then also we're going to get a look at Iceni, who was strong in their separate spring tour and hasn't really been connected to this side, has been shot down in the rankings a bit because of who they played. They had a bit of an easier road there. They did have to play Yaka, so not that easy. What do you see in this Pool A? How do you see it shaking out?
This is, I think, a little bit of a litmus test for Iceni because there have been seasons in the past where they've been dominant on home soil and then haven't necessarily been able to put it together on the European stage. But they've also had seasons where in the UK, they've kind of looked a little bit wobbly and then they've gone into Europe and done really strongly. So I feel like I've never been able to tell which how that's going to translate from one to the other. There's a lot of strong talent that's been added to ICE this year. I think they look very strong. A matchup of spring tour winners in ICE versus BFD Shout is certainly one to watch. Grut, the final at Tom's tourney was not particularly close. It looked like they really were on form in that one. They really struggled in their semi-final against Deep Space and friends, but they showed that kind of championship winning pedigree where they were in a hole and they were just about able to kind of to claw their way out of it. You have the big players coming up in the biggest moments, and I think this is the sort of stage relish, to be honest. They like it when the spotlight's on them. It's the big tournament and they know people are watching. I feel like that's when they play at their best, rather than, with all due respect to a spring tour, it feels like that's kind of not quite the occasion for them. I think there's a little bit of a little bit of swagger and showmanship in playing to a crowd in Grut. I also don't think catch up are an easy out by any stretch of the imagination. If you have an off game, there's certainly enough talent on this catch up roster to catch some teams off guard. Like, I think you're looking at probably two of Grut, BFD, and Iceni realistically to come into the semi-finals, although that's not a given. I think there's plenty of ways, in my opinion, that this could shake out in various different configurations. Like, I think a three-way tie or a two-way tie or whatever, where no one emerges from the pool unscathed, also seems pretty feasible.
And if I had to give you, if you had to take a pick here, who was your top two coming out and making it to the semifinals?
I will, unfortunately, because I like the spice, I will go chalk and I'll have Grut and Shout to come out of the pool. Part of this is the fact that of these four teams, Grut's the only team I've seen in the flesh this year at Tom's tourney, and I was so impressed with the way they came back in the semi-final, how professional their performance in the final was. That I mean, we just know how strong they are. And again, Shout, after a disappointing finish at EUCF, that you come fourth, it's not bad, but compared to where they've been in previous years, obviously for them to come away without a medal is a bit of an aberration. And the early signs this season is that they are, back to a fearsome best. So I will take Grut and Shout, but I see any catch up. Prove me wrong, because I know they can.
Yeah, I think it's going to be close, but I don't know. I saw that Shout Grut game. I was at that spring tour, so I was able to witness it. Shout looked good. I mean, Grut was missing Aurora Leshnik in that tournament. She was playing one of those bling tournaments or something like that, or doing something or the other that wasn't with Grut. But still, Shout looked good. Shout looked like a complete team. They had great tactics. They had great energy. They had great skills. They were look back to their old selves, really. And I don't think it's going to be so straightforward that that Grut takes that game. I mean, it was 15-7, and it looked that different between the two teams. And yes, they're missing Laura Leshnik. Yes, Leshnik will make a big difference. But I think I have a hard time. I think Grut by the end of the season could be this. They lost a Shout in Spring Tour Grenoble last year as well, and then came out and smashed everybody come UCF. Maybe that'll happen again, but I think I favor Shout to win it. I just saw them win the matchup once, and I don't really see much changing.
There's scary talent on this team. When you look at obviously that strong Italian core that they've got, that obviously is the foundation of the roster, but the top ups that they've added in is not exactly mean. You've got a couple of French stars in Juliette Patron and Maëlle Valentin. You've got the Germans in Ava Müller and Charlotte Schall, Kametsova, Mrazova, Dunn. Like, there's serious talent on the roster, although not necessarily all of them are going to be at Elite Invite.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the Elite Invite roster right now. Schall will be there. Sinead Dunn will be there.
Looks like all the transplant players are, certainly.
All the transplant players are there, and I think they've got most of their top Italian players as well. I think they're going to be coming out full force. I think lots of teams have realized Elite Invite is where it's at, and they are bringing the full team here. So I think I'm going to back Shout to beat Krut in this one, and I do think both are going to come out over Iceni, but a 3-way tie at the top wouldn't surprise me.
Realistically, if you're at Elite Invite, you're not worrying about qualifying for EUCF by the algorithm, but boy, do you want the confidence that the tournament win gives you, and it is always nice to have that wildcard berth sewn up early.
All right, let's look at Pool B. We got Moon Cup, silver medalist last year, Jinx Midnight from Berlin, Fabulous, and 3SB. Now, Moon Cup didn't have the best spring tour, and I think that they really weren't in full force there. Definitely a few key players missing for them. I didn't see Leduc. I didn't see Lagala, for example, which are two absolute powerhouses for this team. So I think they're going to be a lot stronger than they were there. I wouldn't take their lower ranking for granted. But was it a fluke that they beat Jinx Midnight last year in that semifinal, or can they do it again? Jinx Midnight tooling up a little bit, getting a few more tidy additions to their roster. We'll probably go into some of those names shortly, but yeah, what do you see here?
I mean, the chief name that I think when we're looking at these additions for Jinx is the fact that Ava Borno, who was a huge reason why Moon Cup got to the silver medal last year, is now living in Germany and has made the switch to Jinx Midnight, and that is an enormous pickup. I mean, monumental in scale. They've a couple of Austrian imports who will kind of add more strength in depth, like Daniela Satina. I think investment just gives them so much size downfield as well, which I have no doubt they'll be able to utilize effectively. I was very surprised, having seen Jinx earlier in the tournament, not to see them in the final, because they looked really sharp. I thought the system is so natural, so fluent to them. I guess you add in newer players, then you will expect that there is a little bit of a teething period, and it's not always going to be at full flow the whole time. They also were missing players like Nikki Priyan, who was on it was at World Games training, and that will obviously hurt you. But yeah, I mean, I think the scary thing about Jinx is that they just look. You look at just squarely at the roster. excuse me, and they might be even better than they were last year, which is kind of tough going for Moon Cup. Yes, they did not have a full roster at Tom's tourney, but even then, I thought they did look a little bit light, to be honest. Getting Lagala back is huge. Leduc was off playing with the Belgian U20s. They'll be back in tow, and that is a huge boost for them. They didn't have Julia Harris, who is ever so steady for them. And again, they're also integrating new players into their system as well. Helen Thompson, once she gets a bit more comfortable, will do kind of a lot of the heavy lifting, I think, powering that offense. You're working in players like Emma Sexton as well. I still think it wasn't a great showing for Moon Cup at Tom's tourney, but they certainly have plenty of room for improvement. I would expect to see that kind of immediately here at Elite Invite. For the other teams, you've got Fabulous, who, I mean, they're just a team who has oodles of experience. They know what it's like to be and play at this level. They're never overawed by it, even if they don't necessarily always have the kind of the biggest household names on the roster. That they're a team that has experience of winning games and going deep in tournaments when perhaps the pressure's off them a little bit, as it always seems to be. They're a perennial dark horse, I think, Fabulous, and teams would be wise not to overlook them. For 3SB as well, kind of, we saw them back at, if not necessarily their best, very close to it last year, and now kind of they've already shown they've kind of got those bragging rights over their compatriots in East Block. They've sealed up that WUCC berth. They've got players who are a little bit have a bit more energy in the legs. Kind of had a few players who they lost to maternity leave who have kind of come back into the fold, and again have got more comfortable. They've got their legs under them a bit more. They're a team that has a real signature style, and I think that is huge. The fact that you know what you want to do, you know your identity, you know who you are, and how to adapt to that. And I think, honestly, it would not surprise me to see. I think Jinx Midnight are probably the firm favourites to top the pool, and then in terms of who's coming out in that second spot, honestly, I could see 3SB doing it.
You mentioned Eva Borneau going to Jinx Midnight, but also there is Teresa Havelkova going from 3SB to Jinx Midnight. So they have stolen two players, top players.
It's not
bad. Either of the teams within their pool. So they're probably in a good spot to take things down, given that those players decided to move. Maybe it wasn't always just for the Frisbee. Maybe it's for other things in life. But I think I agree with you that Jinx Midnight will be the favorites to take the pool. Like Moon Cup did have that upset win, but the Eva Borneau switch is enough to, I think, turn the tides towards Jinx Midnight. I see that. And that 3SB Moon Cup game, I think I still back Moon Cup, but I think it'll be a great game. That'll be one to keep an eye on, especially since we know that getting to that semifinal is so important. I think that game's going to be a huge one. And I think I agree that I believe Fabulous, like you said, we always seem to count them out, and then they end up at the top 8 at UCF. Like, so we have to not be too, too negative on them, but I do think they're probably going to be the fourth team out of this group.
Sounds about right. Especially, I don't know. I haven't actually looked at the weather forecast for Leuven this weekend because I'm not around. But especially if it's kind of quite a strong wind that favors teams that are kind of really well drilled in their zone defenses, I think that plays right into 3SB's hands.
Yeah, taking a look. The wind doesn't look too bad. 13 kilometers an hour or so on Friday. Between 5 and 13 again on Saturday, and getting up to 14 on Sunday. So there'll be some wind, but maybe not quite howling all over the place. So I still think I take Moon Cup and Jinx to make the semis here. So that would line up. My semifinals would be Jinx versus Hrut and Shout versus Moon Cup. The way I see that going, I think Shout taking it over Moon Cup. And then that Hrut Jinx one is going to be a great one. You remember that Tom's Tourney, Windmill final from last year was a phenomenal one. I think it's going to be another great battle. This time, I think I'm going to take Hrut to take it though, and then you'll get that Hrut Shout matchup in the final for me again as a rematch. And since it's so hard to beat the same team twice in one tournament, this time I'll give it to Hrut for the final. Now they'll learn their lessons, but it's not going to be early in the pool phase. It'll be in the final. That's how I see things shaking out. What about you, Benji?
Yeah, so if I say I have Hrut and Shout in Pool A and then Jinx and 3SB in Pool B, I would have Hrut in the final beating 3SB, and then Jinx versus Shout.
Nice one, huh?
Kind of. Jinx have got a good record at this tournament, so I think maybe I see Jinx winning that and then taking the final as well, but I have zero confidence in that. The top of this division is scary, to be honest.
Yeah. Those semifinal rounds are going to be great. All right, let's go from the women's on to the next division here. And we'll go into the mixed division. Pool A, we got Deep Space, Seski, Mosquitoes, and Disconnection. This looks pretty straightforward to me, Benji. I think Seski's not who they were in previous years. Losing Maël Barentin and Gaël Ancelin is too big of a hit for the Strasbourg team. They'll be good, but I see Mosquitoes, based on their early season results, beating TC Taucher. They just won their Austrian Nationals this past weekend as well. I think punching their ticket to WCC. And I see them quite easily beating it over Disconnection. My big question, though, is Mosquitoes versus Deep Space. Are Mosquitoes really in that conversation to be title contenders? They back themselves to be. They beat TC Taucher. They lost to them by a little bit in the final. So they think they're in that conversation. The question is, can they take Deep Space?
For me, it's certainly a case of prove it. Like if they do it, I will say, okay, you belong at that top table. But until I think I see them pick up a big win at a big tournament over over one of those true title contenders.
Beating TFC Tauscher at pool play and spring tour is not big enough for you?
No,
it's a pretty good result.
it's a phenomenal result, and I'm with you. I still think they probably come out second in this pool. But in terms of title contenders, do I think they can beat Deep Space? I think they're probably a step shy. Obviously, teams are not defined by one player, but having a player who can who can bail you out of jams in Alexander Spalholz, who's now gone over to the Open Division with Mooncatchers. That's a sizable loss. And Deep Space cut some very good players this year. They cut a lot of really good players.
And that's because not because they're trying to be worse. That's because they have probably better players that they're holding on to.
But they really like the roster that they have, and given that they're the double European champions at this point, it's kind of tough to argue against that. Like I still have them coming out top of this pool, and I'm excited that we get to see Bex Palmer on a more consistent basis on European shores.
One thing I'll note, I remember Layla Deniston was on the sidelines at Tom's tourney, did not look very healthy. She's rostered for Deep Space in the Elite Invite roster. I don't know. I think that's a big loss if she can't play in that game. But that could be what makes or breaks it. I do think Deep Space are probably are favored, and I will take them to win, but I think that's going to be one to watch. That's, like you said, Mosquitoes. Are you for real? This is the time to show it. And
I would love them to come out and prove it and be like, no, we are here. Deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, the Angaters are there. Jakob Dunschern, Katharina Meisel added to the team this year. They have a lot of talent, and they are, I think a lot of, Vienna Open and women's isn't what they are. I think this is kind of where a lot of the elite talent in Vienna is going towards, because they see this as the premier team now. And yeah, so I'm definitely not counting them out. I think they had a good season last year, and I think they're going to do better this year, but that's partially because there's less in their way, let's say. But given that Seski's going to be a step down, but yeah, this will be a proving ground for them. Anything you want to say about Seski and disconnection here?
Yeah, for Seski, I mean, look, you lose Barentin, you lose Ansalan. Those are two players who fundamentally change the field whenever they're on. But it's a great opportunity for players to kind of to step up and say, look, I'm going to take the reins, and I'm going to show you what I'm all about. Often on the male matching side, it feels like Loris Petitot has been like the little bumper that Ansalan bounces off so well. Getting the disc in his hands a bit more, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Justine Breu as well is a player who's always so unflustered and organized, and I expect her to, really kind of lead from the front this week. With Disconnection, again, they're a team that has so much experience at this level. They're never overawed by occasion. They've got, adding some younger talent into some of the older heads as well. I don't see them necessarily making the top two, but certainly we've seen them kind of upset teams who take their eye off the ball a little bit. Like, I think because so much of the focus will be on Deep Space versus Mosquitoes, if those teams are not concentrating going into the games with Disconnection especially, they're a team that knows how to take advantage of that.
And hey, maybe Disconnection can be the Lemmings of this year and have some scary, out of nowhere, amazing results at Elite Invite. I wouldn't put it past them. But yeah, what do you think of that Seski Disconnection matchup? Who do you back in that contest? I think it's a lot. I think last year I would have backed Seski easily. This year I'm not so sure.
I think this year I backed Disconnection just because the players you are losing for Seski were so fundamental to what they did. That do they have players who can step up? Yes, but it will take time to get them used to playing those leading roles. Kind of going from being a character actor to a leading star is different. And there are lots of players who seem really good in kind of those as role players, but are not necessarily the player who can shoulder all of the burden necessarily for your team when you need it. So this is a great opportunity for them to prove that they have players who are ready and able to step up into those positions.
Yeah, I think Pierre-Alexandre Monet is going to have to step up like that. Celine Antoine, previous World Games star for France, can also be that type of player. So they have some people that are doing it. We'll see what happens when the chips fall. All right, now let's get into this really scary Pool B, at least when you look at the top three. TC Telker's Tartu Turbulence Reading Ultimate, and then Savage Ultimate from Poland. And Savage had a great run, new team. I'm sure they're going to be fired up. You get there for the first time. They'll probably be really good this year with that experience. Now they've been there. I don't think they're going to be out of place here, but I do think that it's going to be hard for them to grab a win. I don't think they're going to be crushed by these teams, but those top three are tough to deal with. And what do you see here in Pool B? I'll let you go first.
A bloodbath. I think this could very feasibly be a pool where no one emerges unscathed and everyone takes games off each other, potentially.
Even Savage.
Even Savage, again, if someone has an off day, or you think, okay, well, I'm going to focus my attention on the other two of the top three. Savage could spring some surprises. I mean, heck, they're here at Elite Invite for a reason. They made the top 8 on merit last year. For TFC Taucher, with Lorenzo Pavan not on the roster this year, that's someone who was often a really strong, deep bailout option for them. Although watching them in the EUCF final last year, they have a lot of players who do a lot of the work for them. And in a tournament like EUCF, where kind of you play a bit more games, I think by the time the final got round, they'd worn down a little bit. Having just the 2 games a day, I think, really benefits TFC Taucher, so that kind of their top players can get a bit more well rested and they're ready to go. For Tartu, the top of that roster is crazy. I mean, you've got the reigning mixed player of the year in Jakob Tam. Helen Terra has been doing it for donkey's years and is still as good as ever. Marin Rabat, I will say, actually, in the Groot versus Deep Space and Friends semi-final, for large portions of that game, Marin Rabat was the best player on the field.
She might have been the MVP of that game. She was insane.
Which is crazy. And looking at the roster in more depth, you're thinking about, well, actually, they've added some pretty tidy players as well. Like Lasma Klubitska's on the roster now.
Yeah, she's not rostered for Elite Invite, so she won't be there quite yet. But they do have Rikke Knudsen from Denmark.
That's the other one.
Yeah.
Like they are adding talent, not just from Estonia, but kind of from some of the other Baltics as well. So I think that, I think it's a great sign that they've been able to, attract players who want to come and play with, a team that's representing that part of the continent superbly. Reading, I think, just are always, they're always there or thereabouts. Kind of players will change and there'll be a little bit of swapping from year to year, but the core of that team, kind of the attitude that they play with is always outstanding. In terms of the kind of the female matching side of the roster, a lot of it's the same. Adding Karen Kwok is a player who's won things in multiple divisions at the highest level. That's huge. A bit more rotation in some of the male matching players, perhaps. Kind of you're losing a big downfield target in CJ Kalikio, but someone like Akita Oyama has kind of maybe a bit more of that short area quickness and burst rather than kind of the big, huge churning top line speed. Pepe Espinosa, again, is a really canny operator. Cam Samuels as well, again, is a player who's got experience in a variety of different systems. He'll bring a really good energy to the team. Reading. Was
it Nicole Lester that played for Deep Space and Friends? She was also really strong for them.
She's absolutely rapid. She's such a tough cover downfield.
I didn't know her as well until when I saw her in that Deep Space and Friends crit game. She was extremely impressive.
Yeah, and you add that to the fact that they're able to develop their own young players and bring them through, which is huge. Yeah, I think Reading. I feel like I'm waiting for them to get back to that medal positions again, and they would argue that they were hard done by it having to play Deep Space in the quarterfinal in the end, rather than potentially later in the tournament. And even then, they played them to Universe, so that was about as tight as it can be. Yeah, I think who's going to come out in this pool? I would take TC Tucker and Reading, I think, but without massive confidence in it.
Yeah, actually, I agree. I think actually Reading's has a good shot to top this pool. I think they're going to have a lot of hunger after last year, not feeling hard done by, and hopefully they use that as fuel to realize, okay, we want to be in that top four. Let's earn the top 4 seed through the regular season and show everybody that that's where we're supposed to be, and not get screwed by the format again. And last year at Elite Invite, Tartu did not do well at Elite Invite. They're a big problem with them. I know Helen Terra really well. She told me that they just before Elite Invite last year, they had I think 1 or 2 outdoor practices.
They just don't have the training time because of the
weather.
Seasons.
Yeah, the weather. So, and of course they take indoor very seriously over there. So that's also they got to finish that up, and that's an important part of their season as well. I know they're taking it very seriously. I know that they have their eye on Worlds for next year. And they said they want to, after the success of last year, they're really going to come together. I think they'll be a lot stronger than last year, given that. Not just the added personnel, but the added focus of like, that, you often talk about buy-in to a team, and it's a chicken or egg thing. Is it the buy-in that causes the success, or that when you have some success, does that cause more buy-in because people are more dialed in? It's a bit of both, and I think that there will be more bought in this year after tasting that UCF medal last year, and they definitely want to push themselves further. But still, I think that Reading and TFC probably have had a bit more time to practice this year. And given that how close these teams are, I think that will give them the edge over Tartu in this instance.
Yeah, that's entirely logical.
Yeah, I have Reading over, really proving themselves, getting over to the top of this pool. TFC Talker in second, Tartu in third, and Savage in fourth. So that
a rematch of last year's final of EUCF in the semi-finals here.
Yeah, so again, we got TFC versus Deep Space, the rematch of that final. And there, wow, that's a tough one. But TFC without Pavan, have they made any big additions this year that you can really think of?
Not that I could see. I'll have another look at it. I know that they have been spending a lot of time with Deep Space. They've had some training weekends together, so that would be very exciting. They know each other, not inside out necessarily at this point, but I think they are very familiar with each other's games. So yeah, if we get a chance to see them match up against each other again, I am very excited for that.
Yeah. So I would have, Deep Space versus TFC. I think because of the loss of Pavan and not much additions here, I'm going to back Deep Space to take that one. And then I have Mosquitoes versus Reading. And that one, I'm going to, again, back the pool A. So I'm going to have Mosquitoes over Reading this time and get a Mosquitoes versus Deep Space, and have Deep Space take the title Elite Invite this time. That's how I see it shaking out.
It's a good job I'm Welsh now, so I can pick an all-English final without bias.
That's what you got going on?
Yeah, I think the point about Reading maybe just kind of having a bit more of a point to prove in the regular season this year to get one of those top 4 spots, that's a narrative I think I buy. Whereas TC Talca, last year they had that remarkable undefeated season up until the very last game of the year, at least in EUCS competition. This year they've already had a bit of the shine knocked off with that early loss. So yeah, and they didn't, of course, were not at Elite Invite last year because it was their first kind of year in the mixed division. So they weren't necessarily playing that same level of competition all the way through. And with Reading over Mosquitoes, I know Mosquitoes finished better than them at EUCF, but I think kind of, again, historically, Reading has been at the top end for longer. And I think that's the experience that I back.
All right, so who do you have winning it? Just real quick.
It's tough to bet against the European champions, I think, in deep space.
They didn't win it last year. Elite Invite. They did not.
That is very true. But I think, yeah, last year's Elite Invite, they had kind of the proverbial stuffing knocked out a little bit by the injury to Fish, who's such a big emotional engine for them, I think.
Fair.
Such a key piece of kind of what they do on and off the pitch that, yeah, I don't see them having such a topsy-turvy weekend this time.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the last division here, the Open Division. And we'll have Pool A, Mooncatchers, Lafota, Gentle, and Hrut. Oh boy, Benji. This is interesting. And I'll get things started here. I'm going to see Mooncatchers. Now, I have to take a quick look at the roster because it really depends. Who are they bringing? Are they bringing everybody? Who's coming over from the UFA for this? Let's take a look at what they have here. I see Ben Yonkers, of course. That's not what I'm thinking about. Galancelon here. Sauf Bontemps is on the roster. Don Desmarais is on the roster. And I do see no Arvids Karklins and no Toms Abeltinch. So if I'm correct, that's most of who's over there. But they get the Chicago guys, but not the Toronto guys. If I have that,
right. That seems about right. And you've got your other handy European additions in David Bardzasi and Alexander Spalholz. They looked a little bit undercooked, I thought, in the quarterfinal against Clapham at Tom's tourney.
Oh, they were understaffed, to be fair.
Yes, they were certainly understaffed in that. And when they've got those players back, it changes them so fundamentally. Arsalan already looks like he's fitting right in, even though it seems like they've misspelled his name on the master roster.
Talking about understaffed, though, Lafota will be without Rossi and Barsazi, who's on Mooncatchers this year. And Gentle will be without Toby de Krana at this tournament. So that's a bit of understaffing. Now, in terms of new staff getting added to some things here, Gentle's adding Alex Atkins from Johnny Bravo. Sorry?
Is that guy any good?
Yeah, I thought. Well, he was pretty good a couple years ago when they won with Bravo. People have said he might have fallen off a little bit this year from early season results of Summit. We'll see. We'll see how he slots in with Gentle. And
that's not a guy I'd want to light a fire underneath. To be honest,
Hrut adding Jason
UFAs
Valley,
real frisbee anyway.
Daniel Rittaler, and Dan Epstein's coming back over from the States as well for Elite Invite. So they'll have their Americans on the team, in addition to their very, very strong team that is, I would say, quite a couple notches above the roster they had last year. Way more solid all the way down. They still have that same top end talent. Of course, bringing Ben Ort back onto the roster is quite good as well, to bring even more to the top end. This pool really could go anywhere. I think that any of these teams could end up in the top. I'm having a hard time picking my top two here, Benji.
This is a proper bloodbath pool. It could go anyway. Like, having Alex Atkins for Gentle is huge, and he will play the Toby de Krana role. He will be their field stretcher, and then you force him underneath and he'll rip it the other way. Hoping for another Arthur van der Weger legacy performance like we had last year, where he went absolutely freaking nuclear. If he's anything like that this year, watch out. But I still, given you're missing arguably your best player, I think maybe I have Gentle on the outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
And Lafota, they don't have Bardzasi, they don't have Rossi, but
they're Lafota.
they are Lafota. Looking at how good the Italy U23s were last year at Tom's tourney, and a number of those players who seem like faceless armies, and then you put them on, and then you realize, oh no, they're actually just really good. You just need to look a little bit harder. I think I'm gonna take the top two in Mooncatchers and Lafota, but I really think this pool could end up in any configuration, and I'd look at it and go, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so I think I'm backing the Dutch boys. I think they're going to make it into this top four. My question is over whom? And Mooncatchers without Karklins Lefota without Rossi, which do I think is more vulnerable? Because I think they're quite similar level. They showed when they played each other in the semi 2 years ago how close these two teams are to each other.
Oh God, what a game!
But I think I'm gonna say that the Don Demarais back, Sof's back. Yeah, I think it's gonna be Lefota on the outside of this one, and Hrut and Mooncatcher's taking the pool, Hrut getting second, and then Lefota and Gentle on the outside looking in.
Perfectly valid.
Yeah. All right, we go to Pool B. We've got Clapham and Chalk, Chevron Action Flash, and Wall City. I think maybe would argue that there's a bit more two teams at the top, two teams at the bottom of this one. But if you underestimate Chevron or Wall City, they're going to take a game off you. And I know they're going to be hungry. I commentated the game of Chalk Wall City. I think it was the quarterfinal last year at UCF. And I know that Chalk played impeccably at that game. They were one of the best looking offenses I've seen. Their reset system so structured, and I love a good reset system as an O-line handler myself. Really, really, really one of the best in the game. And then still having some playmakers like Stangenek and Ruel out there just in case, you got to add some spice to your game as well. But I think Wall City know that they weren't on form in bracket play last year at UCF, and they want to prove that they're still belonging with these top four. They were a top four team by the end of the season last year in the regular season. I know some of their people said that, some of their players maybe took WC a bit more seriously and then stayed traveling around. And then some of them I know arrived like a week before UCF and they just weren't dialed in. I think they got a lot to prove. I think they could push these teams, but I still do kind of see it as Clapham Chalk at the top.
I thought Tom's was really instructive for Wall City because we saw a lot of players having to take major roles that we weren't used to seeing take those roles necessarily. Like having Vanderholm be a centerpiece of your offense, whereas normally he's always a very handy role player, but seeing him have to be the guy, seeing someone like Yol Ben Yosef have to again take on a lot more handling work and look very impressive doing it. The thing I have with Wall City is they don't seem to be at full strength for Elite Invite, so I think that puts a little bit of shine off them. Let me have a look. I did see. Oh no, they're in the zeros. You will get some players back, but some of the kind of maybe the depth I think is what they're missing. They just don't have the same numbers as other players, and when you've got when you've only got 2 games a day, it doesn't matter as much necessarily. But you're missing someone like Danger Jakob Diekman, who's obviously in the German World Games slots, got German World Games squad. Ferdia Rogers was injured, I think, at Tom's. He's still not on the playing roster this weekend, so he won't be there. Getting players like you've got Greenwald back, Phil K's back, Blood Bassoff's back. Business is back as well. So is Konrad Schlur, and that guy's not bad as well. Like you are adding a lot of players, but I think they might just be missing a little bit of depth this week. Chevron, I'm kind of waiting for them to take the step up back into that semi-final place that they have been in the past. Again, the roster is, that does have, a lot of really solid depth pieces. They've been there for a while. They continue to be able to bring younger players through the system superbly, which is huge for them. But I still see Clapham and Chalk coming out of this pool. And
what order?
I'm not going to say it's going to be comfortable, but I'd be surprised if they were upset.
What order do you see these teams coming in? Clapham and Chalk. I think Chalk, from what I've been seeing, I mean, I know Clapham finished higher than them at Tom's, but that had a little bit to do also with who got to face whom at what time. Even though Chalk did lose, I think Chalk lost to Belgium U24 in the 3rd place game, but that's a 3rd place game. It's not always the same thing. I back Chalk to take this one.
I think Clapham, rather than kind of with Tom's, they were treating it as quite an early, a traditional early season tournament. We'll balance lines, we'll rotate through. We won't show the full hand necessarily, but I think when you're against the top level competition, I expect them to show a bit more of their full strength And again, this is just picking the history. I'll take Clapham over Chak.
So historically, this is, I think, one of the first times Clapham will actually have a decent roster at Elite Invite, even though they always do.
Because no one's getting married this weekend, which is wild.
Seems to be against the trend for the last 2 years, anyways.
No, I'm the one who has to miss it because of a wedding. Rude.
So that I've got Chalk versus Hrutz in a semi, and then Mooncatchers versus Clapham in a semi. That one I do see going the Pool B way. So I actually think it's going to be Clapham and Chalk in the final of this one. And like I said, can't beat a team twice. So I'll have Clapham winning it out for Pool B at the end of this tournament. I think that's where they really show themselves better in bracket play than in pool play. So give me the Bullfrogs to go from second in the pool to beating Chalk in the rematch.
Yeah, I'd have Moon, Chak again, and Clapham, Lafota.
So chalky, Benji, so boring. So
do I want to do the spicy thing and pick the second place finisher in each pool to win?
I mean, you did nothing spicy in your pool picks, so you might as well do it in the bracket.
I would love to, but the thing is, I'm just not sure that I see it. Like, normally I love throwing spice in, but I think I see another Moon Clapham final, and
so you basically see it playing out exactly the same way it played out at UCF last year. You think nothing's changed since the UCF last year. It's going to be the same exact semis, same exact results, and then the same exact final.
Yes. But the winner might be different.
Okay.
No, I'll take Mooncatchers. I think it's exactly the same as the UCF. There's no point even doing this. Pack it up and go home. No, like, the thing is, in the past, it's felt very much like we have a clear 1 and 2. For a long time, it was Clapham, Lafota, and then kind of Mooncatchers, Leapfrog, Lafota, and now it's Clapham and Moon as the top 2. But this year, it feels a lot more like a top 4. You know, like really, you could see any one of 4, 5 teams feasibly winning this event.
And yet still pick straight Chalk.
Yeah, I know, incredible. But of the division, of like in terms of my like confidence by division, I think mixed is the division where I'm most confident, and then open. And I feel like generally I have less of a handle on the women's division, just because it's the only division that like I kind of can't put my what would I do in this situation? Not that I've ever been good enough to represent a team at any of these.
I was going to say,
right? But it's the one division I've got no experience of actually being in myself. So I feel like often I have a bit less of a handle for it. And also, I just think the top few teams in women's are so freaking good that I find it very tough to pick a winner.
All right, so there we have it. That'll do it for the Elite Invite preview. Going to give a couple seconds to see here if any questions pop up in the chat. Haven't seen anything. We'll see if Nemo has anything from the Solid Sports chat, because I don't have that visible right now. But yeah, make sure you join the action live.ultimatefederation.eu, on Instagram at ucf.euf, and you'll be able to see everything there, catch the action. Lots of games streamed. Again, every game at Elite Invite will be visible. So if you're following a team, if you care about one team, you can watch all their games. Yes, some of them will be AI streamed, but you will get to at least see all the games in action. So, yeah, Benji, any final thoughts? What are you most excited about for Elite Invite?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, generally, I quite enjoy semi-finals more than finals. I think because finals, well, even if you lose, you've still got to a final. You're still coming away with some sort of silverware. Often the finals turn out to be worse games because there's a bit more pressure in them. Whereas with a semi-final, I feel like, I don't know, especially in the last few years in Europe, we've had banger semi-finals and not necessarily the same level of final. I think semi-final Saturday afternoon is what I'm really tuned in for.
All right. Well, you'll get a chance to watch all of them on Solid Sport. And I believe since there's 2 around, all the semifinals will have should have manual cameras on them. So that's you want to watch those in AI streams.
Let's go.
All right. Thanks, Benji. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And next week, we'll have Jakob Dunschern coming on also to talk about their podcast and how they did with the Mosquitoes and talk about all the results and see where the rankings are at here and in or out. For Benjy Reese, I've been Ravi and Benjy, and we'll see you next week.